The 2010 Green Bay Packers. How could such a talented team not be able to win the Super Bowl? I bet a lot of you are asking and thinking, well, wait a minute, sports. The Packers did win the Super Bowl in the 2010s. Look back at the year 2010 when they managed to win as the sixth seed, the last sixth seed team to win the Super Bowl. Okay, yes, I understand this, but since then the Packers' fate in the playoffs seems to be all but set in stone. They haven't been able to get past the playoff threshold, and it's shown year in and year out. The question is, how did they get to this point, and what can be done to save other teams from suffering their fate in the future? For that, let's go back in time and see what exactly happened to the 2010 Green Bay Packers. In 2011, the Packers had a dominant 15-1 season and were looking to go back-to-back for Super Bowls. They were without a doubt the most dominant team in the league. However, they had many holes. First of all, they had the worst defense in the league, not only statistically, but in the eye test as well. It was pretty clear that the Packers had an issue with defense and were being carried by an unbelievable year from Aaron Rodgers. He more than earned the MVP that year, and the Packers should have won their second straight Super Bowl. One problem: the Giants came into Lambeau Field and immediately stifled the Packers' offensive attack. Not to mention that the Packers receivers couldn't catch the ball for anything that day. And unfortunately, the Packers ended up losing to the New York Giants. The Giants were 9-7 that year. They had won the playoff. They made it to the playoffs purely based on the fact that they had won the NFC East. As a result, the Packers were eliminated from their first try, and the 15-1 curse continues. Now, it's not to say that 15-1 teams can't succeed in the playoffs, but there's only been two to ever win the Super Bowl with a 15-win season.
Unfortunately, the struggles would only continue for the Packers. In 2012, they ran into a white-hot 49ers squad after taking care of the Minnesota Vikings in the first round. The Packers' defense was exposed by the running quarterback system of the 49ers, and the Packers ended up losing in 2012 as well, once again in the divisional round. This team definitely could have went a long way, and people forget that they started 2-3 only to finish 11-5. However, in the end, it was simply not enough. The Packers were eliminated for the second straight year in the divisional round. In 2013, an Aaron Rodgers injury would hamper the Packers' season. After a 5-2 start, Aaron was injured and broke his collarbone against the Chicago Bears. Luckily, the Packers were able to push forward and ended up winning the NFC North title on a last-second miracle play by Aaron Rodgers in the final game of the regular season against those same Bears. However, the next week against San Francisco, it didn't go so well. The Packers managed to keep it close, but in the end, a miracle field goal by San Francisco was all that was needed for the Niners to move on to the next round. If it was any consolation, the 49ers would end up losing to the Seahawks in the NFC title game, who would end up becoming the eventual Super Bowl champions. However, in the end, it was still another disappointing loss for the Green Bay Packers, and more evidence that the Packers weren't quite there yet in terms of winning the Super Bowl. 2014 was perhaps the most brutal year in Packers history in terms of their playoff defeat. They ended up losing to the Seattle Seahawks in the NFC Championship game after disposing of the Cowboys in the divisional round. This is the farthest that they had made it since the Super Bowl in 2010. However, their luck would quickly run out. The Seahawks had an absolutely miserable day. The defense got exploited. Russell Wilson threw for 5 interceptions, and Richard Sherman was injured during the game. All should have been set in stone for a Packers victory, right? Well, you'd be wrong. Instead, the Packers somehow managed to lose the game. There are many factors that lead into this. Morgan Burnett's overall interception when he slid down. Brandon Bostic's fumble when he had the onside kick all but recovered for Jordy Nelson. The Packers' inability to score on the 1-yard line. And of course, Seattle's incredible 2-point conversion, which was basically a miracle heave. As a Packers fan who watched this live, this was absolutely heart-wrenching. And I dare say it is the most disappointing loss in NFL history. Now, some may debate otherwise, but I think it's worse than 28-3, and it's worse than the goal line stand loss that the Seahawks would have the next week. Don't believe me? Go back in time and watch that 2014 NFC Championship game. Look at all the things that went Seattle's way. So much should have played out in which Green Bay should have won this game. However, it simply wasn't meant to be. Seattle would end up winning this game on a great last-second overtime thriller, with Russell Wilson throwing it deep to Doug Baldwin in a perfect pass. And in the end, the Packers watched as the Seahawks went to the Super Bowl, only to lose to the New England Patriots the next on a miracle interception by Malcolm Butler. If the Green Bay-New England match from earlier in the season with Rodgers versus Brady was any indicator, it would have been an absolutely fantastic Super Bowl. And it stinks as a Packers fan that we didn't get to see it. However, in 2015, the Packers losing ways in the playoffs would only continue. The Packers took care of Washington in the first round. However, then they ran into the Arizona Cardinals, who had absolutely embarrassed them a few weeks beforehand. However, the Packers came to play on this divisional round weekend. They gave it everything they had against probably a far superior team. Aaron Rodgers gave it everything he had and put in one of his greatest performances of all time, completing not one, but two Hail Marys. Not one, but two, on the same drive to keep your season alive. You'd think that all of this would lead the Packers to win this game, right? Wrong. The Packers defense unfortunately collapsed in overtime, and Larry Fitzgerald was left incredibly wide open, and he ended up nearly running all the way for a touchdown. The Cardinals would finish it just 2 plays later with a shovel pass that would give Fitzgerald a touchdown, and the Cardinals a playoff victory. Arizona ended up losing to Carolina the very next week in the NFC title game, but again, it's another disappointing what-if for Green Bay Packers fans. In 2016, the Packers started off with a 4-6 record, and it looked like they would not make the playoffs for the first time since 2008. However, the Rodgers declaration of running the table came true, and Green Bay finished 10-6 on the season, was the hottest team in the NFL, won the NFC North, and then buried the Giants in the wild card round. Then they would shockingly stun the number 1 seeded Dallas Cowboys in the divisional round and end their playoff hopes. All that was left between them and the Super Bowl was the Atlanta Falcons. The Packers went into the final game at the Georgia Dome and proceeded to get absolutely blown out. The Atlanta Falcons came to play, and the Packers had perhaps the worst matchup possible for them. They were absolutely exposed. The final score does not show just how dominant it was. I tuned out after the first half watching this game. It was that painful. The Packers just had nothing for Atlanta, and it was far clear who was the superior team on this day. Atlanta earned the championship victory. However, most of that is largely forgotten considering what these 3 words mean to Falcons fans. 28-3. For Packers fans, their loss is mostly able to be overlooked. However, it's still another painful reminder of just how close the Packers came. Unfortunately, 2017 and 2018 would not be much better. The Packers would not make the playoffs in 2017. Why? Because Aaron Rodgers got injured. The Packers were off to a 4-1 start, an incredible record, and looked like one of the best teams in the NFL. However, in Week 6, Aaron Rodgers got injured thanks to an Anthony Barr hit, and the Packers' season ended at that very moment. Brett Hundley was forced into action, and the Packers' season was forced into a downturn. After that, the Packers were never the same. Hundley just couldn't develop with the team, and the Packers went nowhere without Aaron Rodgers. He ended up coming back for a one-off in Week 15 against the Carolina Panthers, with the Packers sitting at 7-6 and a chance to save their season. Unfortunately, he just wasn't ready to come back in, and the Panthers ended up beating the Packers on that day, eliminating them from the playoffs. Aaron Rodgers was shut down for the rest of the year, and the Packers' season ended with a disappointing 7-9 record, their first losing season and first year without playoffs since 2008. It was incredibly disappointing for Packers fans, but they were hopeful that 2018 would be much better. Unfortunately, another Rodgers injury would hamper their season. However, unlike 2017, it wasn't because Rodgers was out, it's just that he wasn't himself. He ended up coming back in a miracle fashion to beat the Chicago Bears after a 20-0 deficit in the first half. Unfortunately, that would be the highlight of their season. The Packers just couldn't overcome their weaknesses, and it was made clear that they just weren't ready to get back into the spotlight. The Packers finished with a disappointing 6-9-1 record, only highlighted by Mike McCarthy's firing. After all of his years and a Super Bowl victory with the Green Bay Packers, Mike McCarthy was let go after a loss to the eventual worst team in the NFL that year, the Arizona Cardinals. It was too much for Packers fans to bear and Packers management, and McCarthy was sent out. He is now, ironically, a part of the Dallas Cowboys as their head coach. Success yet to be determined. In 2019, though, it looked like things were finally getting back on the upturn. The Packers hired a new head coach in Matt LaFleur and started to turn things around. The team got off to a hot 7-1 start and looked like perhaps one of the better teams in the league. Unfortunately, they proceeded to get beaten by the San Francisco 49ers. In the middle of the season, they made a trip out to Santa Clara. They got exposed, 37-8. The Packers were clearly overmatched in this game, and they never looked like serious contenders from that point on. Although they would end up winning the rest of their games after this loss, they went 13-3 on the season. It wasn't enough. The Packers ended up losing in the NFC Championship game after defeating Seattle in the divisional round. The San Francisco 49ers, again, ended up beating the Packers. Not only beating them, but again exposing them. The 37-20 final score does not do this game justice. The Packers just had absolutely nothing for San Francisco. It was an absolute, overwhelming blowout. So what does all this mean? This shows that the Packers in the end just didn't have enough to succeed in this decade. Sure, the 2010 season will always be looked back in fondness, but what's one thing they had that they hadn't had for the rest of the decade in that season? A stout defense. Playmakers on all sides of the ball. The Packers had this in spades in 2010. Unfortunately, they didn't have it the rest of the decade. I blame this on a few reasons, but three main ones come to mind for me immediately. First of all, management was unable to get Aaron Rodgers the weapons he needed. Aaron Rodgers was never given a proper chance with the wide receivers he needed, or offensive weapons. The Packers still had one of the greatest offenses in the sport despite their lack of weapons, and Aaron Rodgers carried the team for the forward in the future. Just imagine if he had some of the greatest wide receivers in the game. Imagine guys like Tyreek Hill, Antonio Brown, other wide receivers, coming into the Green Bay and making a difference for the Packers. My next reason, Mike McCarthy was not the right man. Yes, Mike McCarthy and what he did in Green Bay has to be respected. He won a Super Bowl for the Packers in 2010. That is not going to be taken away. Unfortunately, he just wasn't good enough after that. He wasn't the right man for the right team at the right time. However, the playoff success and continued success into the future meant that McCarthy was going to stay put. That Super Bowl didn't hurt matters as well. Unfortunately, even though you win a Super Bowl, it doesn't mean your job is secure in this day and age. You have to have continued success, and in a place like Green Bay, if you can't maintain success, you'll get the axe immediately. That's what happened to Mike McCarthy. He had one losing season without Rodgers, and then with Rodgers back had another one, and it was just too much for Packers management to bear. McCarthy was let go, and in the end, Matt LaFleur was hired, which was a step in the right direction for Green Bay. However, I think one of the biggest reasons for the Packers' continued failure in the playoffs was their inability to win NFC title games. Look at this statistic. The Packers were in 4 NFC title games in the decade. Excluding the 2010 NFC Championship game, the Packers were 0-3 in the NFC title game. Who were their 3 teams that they lost to? In 2014, the Seattle Seahawks. 2016, the Atlanta Falcons. 2019, the San Francisco 49ers. In all 3 of those games, the Packers had an opportunity to come out as the better team. Yet they just looked flat. They looked like they weren't ready to play. They just didn't have everything that they needed. 2014 is especially haunting considering just how many chances the Packers had to put this game away. 2016 and 19, they just looked like they hadn't shown up, like they hadn't got off the bus. They didn't look ready and were completely overmatched by better teams. In the end, the Packers' failure to win a Super Bowl in this decade is incredibly, incredibly frustrating for Packers fans. However, the good thing is that things are looking up. The Packers have hired a new head coach in Matt LaFleur, who has definitely changed the culture in Green Bay. He went 13-3 in his first year and brought the team to the NFC title game. And he has them set at 3-0 right now in the current 2020 season. Perhaps the Packers' fortunes are turning around for the better. Aaron Jones is doing well as a running back for Green Bay and becoming an offensive weapon. Devontae Adams has emerged as a stout wide receiver, and the Packers' wide receiver core is getting better. They've even drafted their quarterback of the future in Jordan Love. And the defense has improved with Za'Darius and Preston Smith and others such as Adrian Amos terrorizing offenses across the league. Although there's still a long way to go, this could be the year that the Packers turn it around. Or will they continue what happened in the 2010s and continue their failure in the playoffs? Or will the 2020 signal a new era of dominance for Green Bay? Either way, it's sure to be interesting. But the 2010 Packers will be remembered as a team that just couldn't win the Super Bowl. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time. This is Sports on the Mountain.